Well, it's Wednesday morning, and that means it's Sub-Wednesday, Submarine Wednesday. I didn't put in the entire Submarine Wednesday because I wanted to tell you what I was doing today, which is going to be a whole lot of filing and sanding. If you might recall, last week, Wednesday, I was trying to put together the parts that were already done, the mess in the galley and that entire deck, to see if I could get it to fit into the hull. And one of the bulkheads worked and one didn't, but yesterday I worked a little bit more at it, and I'm going to unveil this. This is actually pretty cool. If we can get it on camera. Let's see if we can do that. The thing that I'd been working on all this time here. Okay, I mean, you've been seeing it from the top, but now you can see it, how it looks when it's installed. It hasn't been installed. This is just a temporary thing. Get it on camera and angle it. Yeah, that's how it ends up looking. All those are the bunk rooms. You can see the galley back there. It actually turned out pretty cool. See, look at that. You can see the coffee pot and the pots and pans, and if you move it around, you can see some of the corners. You can see the hanging meat through the door there. This is boardroom. There's some tape that is going to be removed later. And way back there goes into another room. So that's how this is eventually going to fit together. There's lots of touch-up and things. Some of the things that need to be done, okay, before this is installed permanently. Well, of course, the next deck. This is the control deck up here. That's where I'm going to be working today, is the parts that fit onto that. But yeah, if you look at this, this is a servo room, so that has to be done. And this is just a temporary installation of the bulkhead there. So that's the step after the control room. Actually, 2 steps away before that's installed. The things that need to be done are, besides just a little bit of touch-up, okay, is there's some staircases that I have no idea how, but behind this bunk, there's a staircase that goes up through a little hole in the floor, and there's another one here on this section that goes up and comes up here on the control deck. That might be a little easier to do, I'm not sure. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to do that. The other thing is, I talked about all the indentations from the stuff that was glued in on the top, and I filled those in with some plastic putty, but apparently not enough. And so there's indentations all over the place. And when you look at this, you know, if you're looking at it from an angle like this, it's very, very obvious that they're there, and they look pretty scabby. So this is all going to get disassembled, of course, because it's just temporary. It's just temporarily inserted in here. I'm going to refill all those gaps. I'm going to put more putty on there so that it's raised up above the surface, okay, and not just on the surface, and then do some major sanding. Yeah, maybe even like kernel sanding. We'll go beyond just major, up to maybe lieutenant colonel sanding, to try to get that evened out and flattened out. I should have just been more careful originally. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's painted over, but I'll put it on and sand it down and repaint those sections, which are pretty easy to do because they're just big flat sections. Yeah, so as I look around on this, there's a fair amount of touching up that needs to be done. But, you know, the parts fit into the submarine pretty much where they belong. Yeah, so at break time, I'm going to disassemble this so that I can do the fixing of the indentations down here. And this doesn't all go in until the control deck is done anyway. So, but you can see that. You can see there's the bathroom there. And there's the toilets. The other thing that'll need to be done that hasn't been done is that the hull, the inside of the hull needs to be painted to match. So this section, the bulkhead here, gets dark gray. This section here is green. Okay, there's hardly any of the bulkhead shows through here. Okay, it's just from like this section here to here. That's going to be painted just a light blue, and there's a control panel back there I'm going to try to do. But the command area, if you look at the box top here, the command area, the control room, this is multiple colors as well. There's this is green, and then there's a bulkhead that goes right about here. And then there's another section that's this light blue color because there's bunks there. And then the bathroom, which isn't this pink color, it's another one. There's a bunch of lockers and things that go in there. So that's painted that color. Painted. Doesn't look the same as it did before, but there it is. Hopefully I'll get the color matched. Yeah, so what I'll be doing is setting this aside for now. But I wanted you to see how this all fits together, that it does in fact fit, and that more of the submarine starts to get finished. Then after all of this is done, and probably, another 17 months or something at the pace I'm moving, God knows how long, the next section here is a very large chunk full of missile tubes. There's 16 Polaris launching missile tubes that go in here, and it looks like that. Okay, those tubes get fit in there. There's some dead space area there, some machinery that needs to get painted, and whatever little control room. This is probably the control room where they actually launch the missiles, I'm not sure, or maintain them. But so I wanted you to see that it all fits, and then this will probably not be put back together again until the control room is finished. But I was kind of pleasantly surprised that I was able to get this all to fit in here, and that, again, I'll show it to you because it looks pretty cool, especially the galley. That turned out to look pretty decent. Get better light on camera than I get in the room I'm in here. So again, the big thing here is to fix the bottom. I have to, after I disassemble it, I'll be putting some plastic putty on all of those little indentations that I should have gotten right the first time, and then that. And that'll have to sit until next week, and I'll probably sand it down between now and then. I'm going to just put this aside for now. And then, like I said, during break, I'll disassemble that area so that I can start working on the control room floor and refill, hopefully correctly fill in those spaces underneath. But what we have next is this section. This is the control deck. And as you can see, it's not quite as many little parts as the galley and mess deck had. Okay, that had a lot of little parts. But this has a fairly large number of little parts, including some chairs that are almost microscopic in size, and so on. And if you had been with us last week, Wednesday, you would have experienced the searching for these parts. I have 3 kits that I bought because I wanted to be able to put at least one together out of a set. And it was a good thing I had 3 kits because it took all 3 to find parts that were molded correctly, especially in this area. The molding of these like little locker areas and bulkheads and control panels, it's very badly done. Looks like the mold wasn't quite filled, so there were big gaps and holes in them, and you'll see a few that I'm going to have to work on between now and then. The chairs are tiny, tiny things, and they are especially bad because they are molded like not just in a single mold, but there's a seam midway across, and they don't line up. And so the 2 halves of the chairs, the left and right halves of the chairs, don't match by, I don't know, a little bit less than a 64th of an inch. It's not a huge amount, but once they're painted that green color, it'll be really obvious. So that's going to take a little bit of work. Anyway, what I'll be doing today is going through all of these parts, and I'm going to be sanding and filing to get them to be usable. Getting rid of mold marks, sort of filing off some mold marks. Some I'm just going to fill in with the plastic putty and sand down later because they're like indentations or holes. Some have to be filed down. The chairs need to be evened out. So let me show you what we're up against here. These are all the little parts, okay, that I need to be working with. And in here, yeah, they're pretty tiny. Those are the chairs and the sink. There's a sink that goes on one of these ledges. But you can see some of the things I'm up against, like this thing, which is a highly visible part. It's right in the back of the restroom area. There's a circular mold mark right in the center of that locker. And it's an indentation, so I can't really file it down without filing off the detail. So I'm going to try to fill that in with the plastic putty so I don't have a locker with a circle right in the center of it. And then hopefully not get the plastic putty all over everything else, but just get it on there, and it will fill that in. This is a weird one. This is the best of the bunch, okay, in terms of being molded correctly. You know, it's pretty even on all surfaces. These are a whole bunch of lockers, but there's a hole there, okay, and there's no reason for a hole to be there. So the same thing, try to fill that in. Other things like this, yeah, like this extension is not part of the top of the surface. It is flashing, and it's just all around because the mold didn't close correctly. So it's that kind of thing. And then after all of that's done, you've got these things, these control panels and instrument panels that are just stupidly detailed, okay? But like right there, okay, that circle there is not an instrument. No, it's just a mold mark. Same thing here. This one will be easy to take off, okay? This one will be very difficult to take off, and so I will need to make a decision about whether to leave it or not. These, fortunately, are actually all dials and things, so they'll be, or maybe not. That's just a mold mark too. So sometimes I'm going to just take a flaw like that mold mark, which will be, it's just these little circles all over the place. This one has 4 of them. You know, why? Why are there 4 raised circles on this bulkhead? Those I can file off because they're, you know, in places where I can get to them. Same thing's true here. There's one up there, and then there's one here and here that I can get to. But when I'm looking at something like this, you know, where it's on this control panel, I might just make those features rather than flaws. Okay, we'll just say that those are dials or something. I don't know. Well, you know, incredibly detailed design like this, right? You look at this and there's all these little buttons and knobs and things on the control panel. As you can see them there. And then very, very flawed execution. What's interesting, it's got all sorts of little buttons on it, so those will all have to be done. So the painting of all of this, you know, even this, you know, I had the one bookshelf down in the bunk room, and now I've got cabinets and bookshelves. Great, right? So this planning is taking quite a while. It's just going to take a while before this is done. Yeah, so sanding and shaping. Okay, especially these chairs. I'm going to be sanding and filing and sanding to get these parts to be presentable. And then during break, actually kind of when I'm done, that will be a break. I'm going to disassemble the thing that I showed you when I started, okay, where the pieces were put into the mess deck and the galley were installed into the hull. And I'm going to then fill in where I failed to do it well, and fill in the all the indentations from the gluing on the bottom of the mess deck. I'm kind of disappointed that I did that poorly before I painted it. But it just looks bad. And then if I get to do any painting at all today, it won't be the bottom of that, because that all has to set and be sanded. I've got this, which, if you've been watching like for the last 7,000 years, feels like, but the last many months, this is the bulkhead for the front of the torpedo room. Okay, it goes there. And I didn't install it initially because there's a lot of detail on it, unlike some of the other things. And all the gray area on here needs to be painted that light green around all of these junction boxes and dials and everything else. So that is like tiny little brush, one drop of paint at a time kind of painting. And if time permits, you know, it depends on how the rest of this goes. I eventually need to paint it, so I'll probably get started on it. And I got a lot of the detail done, including some of like the dial faces and things. They aren't perfect, but at least you can see that they're there. I decided not to try to paint the conduits. I'm just going to paint those the green color. It's like the conduits were painted the same color as the bulkhead wall, because it's just too much. I mean, it's bad enough I've got these junction boxes that need to be painted around and then touched up. But this is an example of what needs to happen with things like a control panel like this, where there's all sorts of little knobs and buttons and dials and whatever that have to be painted in a way that looks sort of realistic. You can see that this locker has there was a fight in the wardroom and they smashed into the locker and dented it. And there's not much I can do about that. You just hope that when it's installed, that you won't be able to see it very much from the angle that you're looking at. So, yeah, I've got files here. These needle files. I've got triangles and round ones, and flat ones, and this one. I've got other little bits of things that I use for painting sundry stuff. I've got this that I'm going to keep covered up. And down here I've got coarse sandpaper for sanding down certain spots, and this is extremely fine, like 1600 grit polishing sandpaper that I use for, like, after I get rid of these round mold marks here. After I sand or file those off, then I use the fine grit stuff to kind of polish. This is anyway. Yeah. It's little bits of stuff. So I'm just going to work my way. This is from the bow of the submarine, this way across. If I'm looking at the instructions, these are the parts that go from this direction back, because I'm just going to do them in that direction. That's how they're laid out here. And yeah, end up with these tiny little bits here that, let's see what happens when we get there. This is a weird thing. These are supposedly batteries, and they fit in underneath the bunk deck just to, close off an open area the way it looks. And this piece is actually not too bad. It's one of the better pieces of the entire set, except for just where it came off the tree there, and that just needs to be filed off. So I think I'm going to try to move the camera here. I think chat's not working. Usually who or somebody comes in on chat. But I think an effort to fix chat yesterday, it came up on the little chat box. Well, I've been abandoned this morning. Nobody is viewing Sub Wednesday. What's up with that? Weird. Okay, well, I guess I'll just be sad about that. Maybe we'll have to abandon Submarine Wednesdays. Maybe we'll have to do that and just do painting minifigs if it's just, not attracting attention. I'm not sure. But this is what I've got scheduled for today. So this is what I'm going to do, is sanding and filing all those little pieces that go on the control deck. And I am doing that over a paper towel here for two purposes. One is so that I have some contrast with the gray so I can see, and the other is to catch all the plastic dust, of which there is a fair amount. doesn't get on everything everywhere. So see, some of the stuff like that, that's pretty straightforward and simple, right? Just got rid of that little prong there of the excess plastic, file it down. That edge isn't going to show very much, but I might just take some my sandpaper and just rub it on there a little bit. And ta-da! I have accomplished the thing. Just like that. The thing is done. Here we've got, this is where it came off the tree there. It looks, you know, like the edges are all pretty clean. After I disassemble the section that's in the hull, I'm going to test fit all these parts, because usually, almost always, tabs are bigger than the slots and they need to be modified so that they fit. I probably could cut a little of that off with an X-Acto knife, but there's the risk that it cut into the part, so I'm not going to. At some point soon, I will be taking my glasses off, because I need to see closer up, and I can't do that with them on. These are trifocals. So the only part that focuses on what I'm doing is way down at the bottom, which means I have to be looking at, you know, looking up in order to look down. I'm going to take them off now so I can see better up close. Things are still fuzzy, but they're not as fuzzy as they were. Better get these all prepped, you know, so that the flashing is off and the mold marks are contained. Between now and next week, I will prime them. I do not prime the tiniest bits, the little chairs. It's not possible to prime them because any kind of spray paint, I mean, these are bad enough, they move around, so I have to be careful. But those tiny little bits, they just get blown away. They disappear. I almost lost one just picking these parts up and putting them in the tray here from where they were in this little container. That was my parts container. I bumped it and 2 pieces went flying out. But I was very lucky. I was able to find them. My chat test seemed to have worked, but it showed up in chat, but nobody else is saying anything. Nobody's asking for a flip or anything. Okay, so this is the one that has the indentation in the center locker that I'm going to try to fill in later. Let's see, this bulkhead is challenging in that it has a mold mark up here that needs to come off for sure. This one needs to come off for sure. This is where it attached to the tree, so I'll just do the same thing I've been doing with all the rest of them. So one of the other, this goes, this is the other side of the head, the restroom, okay, where you saw the little toilet things, and that goes here. This part that I had just worked on goes here. So these lockers actually come together here, in kind of a stupid way. It blocks the locker in the corner when you put these together. And I guess it goes mainly like that. I don't know why they bothered putting these fire extinguishers in, because after this is put together, you cannot see them. But I think, yeah, I need to get this little mold mark off anyway, because that piece goes right up against this bulkhead, and this extends, like I said, like a 64th of an inch almost. And what that means is that that part will not lay flush against the bulkhead. I'm trying to keep the file, parallel to the, I don't want to dig gouges into the rest of it. I just want to file off the circle bit. Down until I start to file into the rest of it. And there's a bunch of these that I need to take off. I have mentioned many times, and I will mention once again, that these circular mold marks, in the raised ones, are easier than the inset ones. Circular mold marks are just by far the most annoying part of these entire models. There's no reason that they need to be there. Okay? Why do they even exist? No excuse. So as I file it, if I use the pointy one. So as I file it, you can see it, the rough surface, it gets lighter. So you can really see where that raised surface is. So yeah, that's why today's episode is Sub Wednesday, filing and sanding. It's just a lot of this stupid stuff that didn't have to be there. This would just all put together a little more carefully if it were molded more carefully. Not too long ago, I did go into one of my monologues, I do that, right? About design versus manufacturing engineering. And in this particular case, the designers just paid attention to a lot of detail. Like even the little louvers and handles. I mean, the handles on the lockers, really, they included the detail on that. And then the people who actually molded it couldn't get enough plastic in the mold, and you ended up with an indentation. You can see it there on the locker. It's like somebody spent all that time and energy designing those details and building them into the mold. I mean, those lines and locker handles and everything were built into the molds, right? Very, very carefully done. And then didn't get plastic into the mold. Seriously. You couldn't show the respect you needed for the people who designed this and built the molds. And what turned out to be true is that, I have 3 different kits, 2 of which are George Washington, another one of which is a Thomas Jefferson, which is a later model. Most of the parts on the inside, almost all of them, are the same. And they all have the same kind of flawed execution. So it's like it started out bad and just kept going bad. There must have been complaints. Somebody must have complained about the quality of the molding. But if there were any complaints, they didn't do anything about it. Because when you've got the same problem on 3 separate kits that were probably molded not only months, but in some cases probably years apart, taking a little bit of this polishing stuff here. I'm just getting rid of some of the coarse scratch marks from the file. Because these bits are going to show, especially this right here on the end. And although the paint, can fill in little bits of scratches, it'll still show some surface differentiation. Anyway, I need, almost every time I do this, I need to just whine about how badly done the molding is on this submarine. Okay, so this is like the head. That's a battery. These are the parts that go to the head on this side. And then there's another bunk, one of my least favorite things, painting bunks. Okay. This is a combination of badness. So there's 2 raised circles here on this end that I can file down. And then there are 2 that are indentations here that if I filed this whole thing down to get to that level, it would get rid of it. I mean, it would just get rid of the whole edge, and that would be bad. So I'm going to fill those in when I do filling with the plastic putty. But these I can take off. No. That. You can't really tell. I think what it is that these were most annoying thing about these circle things is that they just do not belong on the submarine. It's just really obvious. The problem with these bunks is that is me, not them, is getting the sheets painted white, because the contact points, you just have to get the edges of the brown paint versus the white paint just right on the back and on the front. And I'm sure that a more skilled painter would be able to do that. I've even thought about trying to tape that, but I don't think it would work. Feels like it's now an indentation rather than a raised part. Yeah, it actually is. It was an indentation with a raised edge. Nice. So this needs to be filled in. That needs to be filled in. This needs to be just set aside. I'm putting here the parts that need white plastic putty filling. Now is 2 out of 2. This is 3 out of 5 that need white plastic putty filling. The rest of them don't look like they do. Yeah, I'm cleaning up this side because this side is going to show. And yeah. Somebody must be in chat. I just don't think it's working, despite the fact that I tested it. So I have to apologize if I'm not responding to somebody who's chatting because it's not showing up on my chat screen. So I welcome anybody who is, and again, I just apologize for not responding to you because if you are doing something in chat, I can't see it. And that, when I went into chat, the control, well, a new follow. Thank you, Darkness. Yeah, that didn't show up on my other chat screen. And let's see, I'm just going to leave it like this. Okay, now you can't see what I see on my monitor. I have a monitor that shows me what you're supposed to be seeing, sort of. But, yeah, there it is. So, Darkness, thank you for the follow. I really appreciate that. And I'm sorry I didn't get back to you earlier because the chat screen wasn't showing up. Okay, this is really weird. I changed my monitor so I could see the chat, so I could see the new follow. But what happens now is I'm going to count the seconds. Okay, I'll make a movement. 2, 3. There is a 4-second delay between me doing something and it showing up on my monitor. I am not going to pay attention to that because it will make me nauseous. But what I really, the reason I even have that up is so that I can see whether I'm on screen or not. Because I have this habit, especially when I'm doing little bits like this, to move in a way so that I'm not on screen. Anyway, the compromise is this way I get to see the chat. And who does finally show up, who finally shows up and asks for a flip. I will do a flip after I'm done with this bit. And then, okay. This is just a weird combination of things, but it's very, very odd to be doing things and not seeing it happen for 4 seconds. A Nintendo presentation. Nintendo was more compelling than Submarine Wednesday. I find that highly disturbing. Talk about being dissed. But yeah, we got a new follow. Isn't that amazing? This is really cool. Thanks so much. Yeah, so this is a Submarine Wednesday version of Relaxing Painting, and there's hardly any painting going to happen today because I am pretty much just preparing pieces for the next section of the submarine. I'm going to do a real quick recap for those of you who are following later. Is I got the mess deck and stuff. There it is. Okay, it showed up 4 seconds later. I got this to actually fit into the submarine. It's just there on a temporary basis because I wanted to make sure it got in there. And I'm working on this area up here now. And there's a lot of little bits and pieces, and none of them are well molded, and hardly any of them fit. So I'm just sanding and filing them to make them look presentable. And then during break, I'm going to disassemble the bit that I did where I put this into the submarine and included this deck. I'm going to take that apart and check the fit to see if these pieces actually fit where they're supposed to go, at least on a preliminary basis. Sometimes after they're painted, like especially after I paint the deck floor, it fills in all of these little gaps, and then I have to clean them out before things will fit again. But sometimes the tabs don't line up with the slots at all. Sometimes the tabs are just the wrong size, so I do a preliminary fit of all of those before I prime them. The other thing is that this deck shows, you can see the bottom of it, and I filled in the gaps. Yeah, all of those things. Well, hi, that's wonderful. Yeah, the translator's working really well. Thanks for joining all the way from Argentina. Yeah, this is actually a D&D show, but I've been given special permission to work on a childhood project. When I built this submarine when I was like in 7th or 8th grade, and yeah, which tells you how old I am. And I was given permission to start it one day when I didn't have anything to paint, and so on Wednesdays, at least for now, as long as people are interested and willing to watch, I've been working on this submarine. So yeah, let me show you some things that were done more recently. And then this one I finished on Monday. It'll show up. There it is. This one I finished on Monday. It's a dragonkin, a metallic kind of bronze dragonkin. And that, there's 5 of these. This is the bronze one I started on the blue one. If you come back on Friday, you'll see me moving forward with highlighting the edges of the armor, kind of like the lighter color here is going to be a different color on this one, and then I'll be using speed paints to paint the rest of it. And let me just show off some stuff. It's easier to show off this stuff than it is to be working on the submarine. This is an OTUG. I did this last week. It's just to give you a sense of perspective. Dragonkin are fairly large, and so you can see that the OTUG is even larger. And I'm sure that this OTUG is going to show up in our D&D campaign sometime and will attempt to destroy us. But we have a bard who can use persuasion, and we have a druid who can talk to both monstrosities and animals. We are going to try this. Sundays. The live chat stream is Sundays at 2. 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. So that would be starting about the same time of the day that this ends. This goes from 10 until 2. When we run into this, we are going to attempt to befriend it. Okay. Oh yeah, D&D can be great fun. The campaign we've been working on has, sorry, I'm moving, just getting a few other things. The campaign we've been working on has been going on now for over a year, and our characters are pretty well developed, and it's really cool. So if you have a chance, it's 3 Sundays a month. We take one Sunday off of the live chat stream, and social media will usually tell you what the schedule is. So there's that. And if you can't catch it, actually all of our episodes. Oh, thank you. I'm going to show you these. These are cool. These are bollywogs. We actually print these. These are printed on our own very own rosin printer. Yeah, they're printed on our very own rosin printer, which is across the hall from me here. And then I paint them. And if I'm not around, one of our other D&D members, generally Nicole, who plays Changeling Druid. I'm still getting this 4-second delay, so I can't really see what you see until 4 seconds after I move. Anyway, yeah, so these are printed on our very own Ford 3D printer, and then either Nicole or I print them. These are characters, these are mimics, fake Muriels. Muriel is one of the characters on our stream, who is a druid Bollywog. This, Nicole painted this, and you can tell that Nicole did it because all of the shading and detailing are way better, especially like the face. Okay, her shading and detailing are way better than mine, and she did this one in about half, maybe even less than half the time it would have taken me to do something that wasn't nearly as good. So I really like it when she does minifigs because she does a really excellent job. You know, this one's okay. This is the one I did. Okay, you know, and it came out all right, but it's just not of the same quality as hers. So we started this campaign over a year ago, and we're just playing on a mat, a 1x1 inch square mat, which we still use as kind of a base for what we do. But Alexis, our DM, got a 3D printer. There's some behind me here. There's 3 of them now. We used to just have one. And said, well, let's print out some dungeon tiles. And so we made some walls and floors and little scattered pieces like tents and crates and things like that. And then it just got more and more elaborate. As you can see, the stuff that's showing up underneath me on the stream are some examples of things that we put together and eventually were used on the show. But now what we're working on are some really elaborate preset dungeons. There's like a tavern and a warehouse and a necromancy lair, and things like that fit together. And if you hang on a little while later, I can't do it now because I don't have a space to do it. I'd show you how the dungeon tiles all work. Anyway, what you're seeing is what happens on Wednesday, because about, I don't know, like 6 months ago or something, I ran out of dungeon tiles and minifigs, and so I needed to paint something, and I was given permission to work on this submarine, and it's moving along very, very slowly. As you can see, there's You know, this is like part of the directions of the submarine. And yeah, so that's what's happening on Wednesdays. But on Friday, I'll be going back to working on the Dragonkin. I'll be working on the blue one and starting on. There's going to be a red, black, and green one as well. And I might start on. I'm not sure which one. I'm going to start on one of those other 3 colors as I work on the blue one. Maybe the red one. I might start on the red one and then the black one and then the green one. I'm avoiding doing, I guess the green one last. I'm not sure why. I really like greens, but, and we have a fair number of green paints, but it's interesting. So this piece wasn't too bad. All I had on it was the sprue bit where it comes off of the tree. There's one of our dungeons there, with minifigs on it. But yeah, if you can catch it, it would be... What is that? Oh yeah, it's another one of those circles. So there's another piece that needs to be filled in. There's now 4. The circle there needs to be filled in. These circles here need to be filled in. That hole there, and then there's a circle here and here, right in the middle of the lockers. Those need to not be there. These are 2-sided pieces, but the backs of them are okay. So there we go. That will be some delicate work. What's next? This is the bulkhead that goes from the back of the bunk room. And this has 4 raised circles on it, all of which need to disappear. This side, which is on the command center side, has lots of detail stuff, conduits and hatches and junction boxes and a ventilator. But this is molded all right, which is good, but this side has these circles and they will definitely show, so I need to take those off. Fortunately, they're in nice flat areas where I can do that. This is weird. On this little shelf here, that little shelf, there is a sink. Okay, why the sink isn't in the head or the bathroom? Why isn't it there? Why is it instead in the back of the bunk room? Makes no sense at all. But that's the way it is. So I'm going to say that despite the fact that the designers did some really amazing detail in places, I can't believe that the real submarine was built that way. So this piece is going to take a little while. I need to file off this thing, the prong there where it was attached to the tree, and then gently and carefully file off these circles and then polish them down a little bit. And you can see, it kind of looks like there aren't too many more pieces left and they're not in too bad a shape, but these are a challenge. These chairs, these tiny little chairs, are going to be taking more work than one would want. But the D&D campaign has been a lot of fun. Can't see the chat screen without my glasses, and I can't see what I'm working on with them. You were both monks? Oh my. And you got into a battle with vampires? Your DM is vicious. Well, thank you for the follow. And when you come back, you'll be maybe seeing some different things as I begin working on, hopefully after break, maybe after your lunch, I'll be working on doing some filling in of these gaps, these little holes, and maybe even working on painting this submarine, the torpedo room bulkhead, which needs to be done eventually. Yeah, if the party's not well balanced, it can be interesting and fun and challenging all at the same time, and dangerous. Well, thanks, Darkness. We'll see you a little bit later. I appreciate it. Six super vampires? Oh, wow. I bet you guys probably got pretty beat up, didn't you? If you listen to our old episodes, oftentimes we have no combat. We just talk about food. Or we go shopping. We've had some shopping episodes. Those have been fun. Nothing like buying retail and looking for bargains. No, getting that little bit off was a little bit more challenging than I thought it would be. Just trying to get it. You just never know where pieces are going to bump up against each other. You know, whether you're going to have a gap or whether there's going to be the tiniest little bump will throw off a bit. Okay. Now I need to get these circular mold marks off of here, so I'm going to just be carefully filing away at each one of them until they're gone, hopefully without damaging the area around it very much. If I can use this one, it'll go faster if I can. Oh yeah, let's go quiet here for a minute. So this is the submarine model is really kind of cool, but if I just put it together, it would have been done by now. But I decided that since I am now older and somewhat more skilled and patient than I was when I was like 12, I did it the first time, I would be taking the time to get rid of things like these mold marks so that they wouldn't show, and that I would actually paint the detail as much as I could without being silly about it. So it's ending up taking just a huge amount of time as I work very slowly through this thing. I also work pretty slowly anyway, just because I do nowadays. Everything is slower than it used to be. But I'm hoping that it pays off. The galley and the mess hall that I finally got to fit into the hull actually look pretty good. And I'll show them to you again before I disassemble them, because they're in there just temporarily. It's just a temporary assembly, just because I wanted to make sure that they fit, because once this is done, then the whole front third of the submarine will be completed, which is going to feel really like something is completed. Well, at least this part doesn't have things that need to be filled in. The other file was working better. I had more control. So this old saying, slow and steady wins the race. That, of course, is nonsense. I mean, if anybody has ever been in a race or even watched a race, you know that slow doesn't win. That's why it's called a race, right? Slow doesn't win, but in this case, slow and steady isn't winning the race, but it eventually gets things done. So I've been convincing myself as I've been working on this submarine what I've found is that if you keep doing something, as long as I keep working on something, eventually things get done. You know, it just takes a long time, and it's sometimes a little frustrating because it takes so long to get anything done, but eventually things do get done. And like I said, I'll be showing it to you again because people came on later after we get to the break, which is, a little, at the pace I'm going, will be about an hour. When I finish prepping these pieces, especially those little chairs, which are going to be a real beast to get done. I'll show you how it all fits together. It's really pretty cool. But I do need to disassemble it because there's parts that still need to be put in. There's paint touch-up, and I need to refill the indentations that I thought I had filled in that failed to fill in on the bottom of the deck, because they really show badly. I'm going to do this little guy next. This is a control panel with buttons, I guess. Part of the trick to all of this eventually is going to be deciding how to paint them. The box top doesn't provide terribly much clue about that, other than that, the dials are white and buttons are black. But I think it isn't so much any kind of notion of historical accuracy of the control panels, but just, since they took the trouble of molding in some of these dials and buttons and whatever, some will be black, a couple will be red. The control, I'm just going to cut that off. There's a lot of flashing on this one that is not part. It almost looks like an extension of the control panel, but it's not. It's just junk. Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure that you can see them, even if they're not like historically accurate or whatever. Yeah, the mold on this one leaked all over the place. It didn't close properly. And so there's just flashing all around the edges. Fortunately, though, it filled, so there aren't any big gaps or anything showing like there are in some of them. There was this control panel here. This is the only one of the three that was at all usable. The other two, here, and here, right on the top, were actually, because you'll be able to look in and see it, just had chasms. They were like big valleys that were just not filled in at all. I was really kind of concerned that I'd have to, I'm not even sure how I would have gotten it to work, but it wouldn't have looked very good. But the third one was like, oh my, a miracle. It did feel almost miraculous in that the part was complete. I think these must have been really expensive kits, relatively speaking, back then. I'm not sure who sprang for it. I don't think my dad would have paid for it. I bet my aunt bought it or something, or I got it as a gift for a birthday, maybe. Because it's very large. There's hundreds and hundreds of pieces. The detail is pretty good, even though the execution is bad. So that's why it's so surprising that they continue to have such poor quality control manufacturing. Because if people were paying a fair amount, if they just bought it for a kid, what would a kid know, right? I didn't know. The parts either fit or they didn't, and I used a little single-edged razor blade to make them fit, and I glued them together and didn't really paint them very much at all. So I wasn't worried about all these flaws like I am now, like especially these circles. Wouldn't have even noticed that they were there. But if there was somebody who was who took this seriously, I can't believe that they wouldn't have complained about the quality control. I mean, seriously complained about the quality control of the modeling process, the molding process. This control panel is going to show pretty significantly. It's way over to the side and kind of stands out alone. And it's got these circles here and here, and they're just nothing. I'm just not going to try to take that off. I'm going to call that just, this one isn't too bad, it's smaller, but it kind of fills the space. I'm going to pretend that that's some sort of dial. It doesn't have any, things on it like these do. They have little little dial pointers and stuff. But this one, I don't know. It if it wasn't there, it would just be a blank space. So I think I'm just going to leave it and then paint it in some fashion to make it look like it belongs there, like that was intended. I can do that on this one. This other one, not so much. Okay, this obviously shouldn't be there. It's just there for no point at all. This one, yeah, I'm not sure if I'll take that off or not, but this, I think this goes like this. I mean, not quite, it's like there's a gap here. So that's going to be kind of covering that. So I can take that off and that won't make much difference. This here, yeah, it's just going to be a feature, just like it was on the other one. Rather than a flaw, I will just say it is a feature, and that's how there's something meant to be there. I might change my mind after I see how these pieces fit together, because I'll be doing some test fitting. After I disassemble what I have done. So just, to preview the rest of this as I continue to do filing and sanding. I was able to get the galley and the mess decks to fit into the hull of the submarine, which allowed me then to see what additional work needed to be done before final assembly. And there's, a fair amount of it. I have to paint the inside of the hull to match the stuff that's going into it. And I failed in my effort to fill in the spaces, all the indentations where stuff on the above deck got glued in, and you can see it from underneath. And I thought I had filled them in, but I didn't. And then I started painting and I realized that they weren't filled in. And I thought, it might look okay anyway, but it doesn't. So I need to do that. I need to refill those with the plastic putty so that they extend above the surface so that I can sand them down to the surface later. And at least minimize how much irregularity there is. Okay, so that one's gone. And this one I'm just going to leave there and paint it like a dial or something. I'm not sure. These tubes hold the you'll see when I show you the other thing, the temporary installation about how it all fits together. The periscopes and the radio antenna, if everything is aligned correctly, and that's a big if, okay, if everything is aligned correctly, they will go into these and actually go up and down. That little thing, I think, belongs there. That is a point that allows it to be centered and glued into place. So one of the things I'm thinking of, I'm just sort of speculating here with these stairs. There's two staircases here that need to go into the bunk and the mess decks, between decks, one of which you can't see at all, so I'm not sure why I'm going to bother with it, but it's supposed to go in. Because they have to be aligned from one deck to the next, which is, as you'll discover when I look at it, is really not easy. is I have, instead of using the polystyrene cement, the stuff that melts it and welds it together, is with some of the minifigs, I've used contact cement. And then the advantage to that is that it adheres immediately and sticks, but it's also flexible. And so I can get the bottom of the staircase to fit and stay where it's supposed to be. And then because it shows some flexibility, I can manipulate the top of it until it goes into the opening where it's supposed to be. At least that's the plan I'm having. And I'm hoping that plan works, because otherwise it will take a miracle. The other thing that'll be a miracle is if these fit. They have to go between decks, basically, between the control deck and the sail deck that's above it, from which the periscopes and radio antenna protrude. So they have to be the right length, and they have to line up. Then what are the odds? What are the odds of that? I would say small, but you have to make it work. Okay, so this is the periscope. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a handle here and a handle here, and that's where you look through it. And then there's this extra bit right here. And I can't tell whether that's a thing that's supposed to be there. It doesn't look molded. It looks like it's just like that's where it was attached to the tree. So I need to take that off without affecting the part next to it. Yeah. So usually on these kinds of streams, I get to ramble on about something, and usually it's, of no little consequence. But today I'm just not. I'm just had the same issue on Monday as I've run out of things to ramble about. And then I don't want to just end up repeating myself and rambling about things that I've rambled about before, like tiebreakers in sports. What happens if you end up tied at the end of regulation? And, I really complained about football, not American football, but what we call soccer in the U.S., which everybody else calls football, but we don't, because we have our own kind of football, which is not at all like football. But yeah, so I've rambled on and whined about that, but I don't need to do that anymore. I'm just running out of topics. I'm going to have to ask other members of Dyson Dungeons, some people who have a little bit of creativity and interest, maybe, what I could go on and on about. Okay, so I've got the big pieces cleaned up. We've got 4 here that when I do the filling in on the bottom of the mess deck, when I refill those things that I thought I'd filled that I didn't fill. I'll do these as well. But now I've got these tiny little chairs that I have been complaining about for a long time. And then this thing, this is a sink. Yeah, it is. I mean, I saw these holes and I thought those were flaws, but that's actually the top. If you can even see that, there's a sink that goes on top of a shelf here like this. And what I'm going to do is 2 things. One is there's a sprue mark on the back here that needs to come off for it to fit evenly. Can't see the back of it when it's put in place, but that would get in the way. And the other thing is that it's a little too thick. And then there's this circle on the bottom that keeps it from setting on its shelf flat. Okay, because this goes onto the shelf, but that little raised circle on the bottom keeps it from sitting, and it's too thick anyway. So I'm going to make it thinner by filing away at it. I'm going to have to do this one side at a time. Can we do it this way? Maybe I can just rub this. Yeah, I'm going to try that. What the heck? We'll give it a go. I'm going to just rub it against the file. And then periodically lift it up to see how it's going. But at least I'm doing the whole surface at the same time, which I can't do if I file it from the top. It's a little uneven, but better than if I just had been filing it from the top. And it's still, that raised surface is really large, the raised circle. I mean, really large, not in terms of diameter, but it was raised up quite a lot. Which explained why it didn't set on its shelf very well. There, it seems to be mostly gone now. And it seems mostly flat and even. So at the same time, I'm making it thinner, which is good. I want that to be the case. And these parts. And this is one of the larger ones. The chairs are even smaller and worse to work with. And yeah, you'll see those in a minute. So here's the sink, and the sink goes on this shelf. Maybe it extends a little bit off. There. It's better now anyway. Turn this over. I'm going to put the done ones in the box top. Okay, there's 2 sizes of chairs. The people who control the submarine have these big chairs, and the other people have these little chairs, and you can see just how tiny they are. Okay, really nasty, tiny things. And they're badly molded, and I need to make them work. And if you look at it, you can see there's a mold mark right down the center of the chair. And if you look from one side to the other, you can see that they don't match up. That's what is now the bottom is higher than the top, and vice versa. So when they molded these, the molds didn't match. So I've got 3 of this size chair and 4 of the little ones. And this is going to take a fair amount of work just to get them so that the surfaces are even with each other. And they need to be, because once they're painted, it's sort of a semi-gloss to represent navy green leatherette, right? All of these obvious flaws will be really obvious. Even the bottoms need to be evened out, otherwise they won't set where they are supposed to set. They'll be tilted. And these are the bigger ones, so they're easier to manipulate. Lovely, huh? This might take longer than the time before the break just to get these done, because every single surface of the chair, except one side, the other side has a circle on it. Lovely, right? So that needs to be filed flat. And then the fronts, there, we see the back, the mold mark down the center, and then the top doesn't match. I really have to complain, serious complaints about the chairs. They're like the tiniest piece in the model and the most poorly done. But they're tiny, but they're not invisible, right? There's that. And then there's the top. And then there's the front and the seat and the front of the seat. Look at the back of the chair. Fortunately, this plastic is pretty soft. Okay, it's giving way quickly. At least there's that. About Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Oh my, yeah. Pen and paper. So what Who is talking about is that I was there at the beginning, or very close to the beginning, of Dungeons and Dragons. I participated in one of the very first video broadcasts. It wasn't really a cable anyway. Cable casts of D&D campaigns. That's my claim to fame around Dungeons and Dragons lore, kind of, is in Madison, Wisconsin. In, I don't know, it must have been, I can't remember the exact years. It had to have been sometime between 73 and 77. I know that's a broad window. It's not exactly nailing it down, is it? But somewhere in there, I'm going to say, just, to pick a date, 1975. I'll call it that. Friends of ours had some friends who decided that D&D was great fun, and there was a cable access. Cable access just started in Madison, which means that if you reserved a studio, you could get your show on the cable channel that nobody watched. Okay. It's like the community access channels now, the ones that show things like your kids' ballet recital or something that nobody but your family cares about. Anyways, kind of like that. It was this the community cable access, and there was a real studio. It had 2 cameras and some microphones and things. So, studio stuff back in, as it was in 1975. Big little CRT monitors so you could see what was on the cameras. And we started, we did it. It's either Friday or Saturday nights. I can't remember which one. It was one of those weekend nights where, okay, so think about this, right? It's either Friday or Saturday night, right? In Madison, Wisconsin. And so what do you do starting at like 9:30 or something? You play D&D, right? Because that's your social life. I guess that says something too, doesn't it? Anyway, yeah. So it wasn't any different then. Just thinking back at it, yeah, it's the weekend night and everybody else is out there partying and doing whatever they were doing. But we were playing D&D in this community cable access studio. And the game had just sort of come out. There wasn't, let's just say it wasn't highly sophisticated. There were like 4 players, and my wife and I ran the cameras. And there was stage direction, kind of. It's like stage direction, show the players. Okay, so one of the cameras would show on the players as they were sitting at a table, pretending to be whatever they were, a warrior. There weren't too many things it could be when it first came out. Like there was a dwarf and a human and an elf. And it was all combat based. There wasn't a lot of role playing because that's what D&D was. You just wandered around and ran into mobs that tried to kill you, and you tried to kill them. So yeah, we ran the cameras back in, like, I'll just say 1975, doing what we would now call a stream, and back then we would call it broadcast, even though it was on cable, because that's what you called it, the D&D campaign. And it was pretty cool. We did that for a couple of hours. We ran from like 9 until midnight or something, including set up and tear down, because we had to leave the studio intact when we were done. There would be a break. We order in pizzas from someplace and have pizza, because that's what you ate at like 11 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night, when your social life was playing D&D in a community access cable studio. So some of the things I remember is that, there was kind of a producer who decided which camera. There were 2 cameras, but you could only show one at a time. We didn't have split screen technology. That was way beyond what the studio could do. So generally there was 1 camera on the players and just sort of stayed there, and then you'd see them, and another camera, the other camera would move around between, like, maybe doing a close-up of one of the players if that player were, doing something interesting or it was their turn, and the D20. And the D20, because that was the only die. We didn't have, nobody rolled D6s or anything like that. Everything was the D20. In order for the audience to see what was going on, the D20 was a wheel, like a Wheel of Fortune wheel. It was a vertical kind of thing. And to roll the D20, players spun the wheel. And one of the cameras would then show the wheel spinning around, and as it came to a stop, either a cheer or a groan would go up depending on what it was. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. We did that for, I don't know, months and months. Probably, I think it was like a summer thing. Anyway, it was pretty fun. So yeah. And now I'm doing a stream again, but I'm actually playing and not just doing the camera in a pretty sophisticated studio. The D&D thing, the D&D studio is really good quality microphones and good quality cameras, good quality DMing. Yeah, way different than. In fact, talking about paper and pencil, it was like these big sheets of paper that you get when you're doing a presentation, flip chart kind of things. I'm pretty sure we had those with big markers on them that showed the character name and their character type and their statistics and things, so that the audience could see that. We didn't have pictures of the characters. There were apparently no artists among us, so that we didn't have like line drawings or anything of the dwarf barbarian or whatever. But I'm pretty sure we did have descriptions of the characters on these flip chart kinds of things that we could take the show on the camera when it was their turn or when they were being introduced. Anyway, yeah, that's the early days of D&D. There were no 3D printed dungeon tiles, that's for sure. All there was imagination. I think everybody was level 1 because that's how you start. So we'd run into gnolls and kobolds or something. I don't remember if a character was ever killed off or not. I don't recall that. Although I wouldn't doubt that did happen. I think there were snacks, there was pizza. There wasn't any beer. There's no alcohol consumption. That was actually, thinking back at that's actually kind of startling, because this was Madison, Wisconsin in the 70s, right? And we're all students there. You would think that would have been an essential part of it, but no, there wasn't any alcohol consumption. And so it was a very wholesome thing. And I don't think there was any swear words, because no one you had darns and hecks and things like that, because this was 1970s community cable access, and that you just couldn't have those things without losing your access. So we were pretty careful about that. Okay, there's 2 of the 3 large chairs. Little did we realize how innovative we were. Okay. There's lots of things back then that could have been different. you know, computers were just coming out. I think the first PCs were like Commodores and things were just popping out. And people in computer science had the ability to, you know, there was the opportunity to cash in, like some people did, like, making games and computers weren't looked at as a form of entertainment. They were tools. And so people in computer science who had the skills, at least back then, just took engineering and math and things like that really seriously, and didn't take cashing in, making money by making computers popular. We could have had sorts of mega millionaires come out of graduate schools and even undergraduate departments then. But no, we were all focused on something else, doing science or, stuff like that. I actually had that opportunity and just let it go. We had these tiny little computers that we used in my department to control experiments. And they were custom designed just to do that. They would take inputs from like clocks, electronic pulses, so that you could use the computer as a stopwatch, which was really pretty good because you get it right down to the millisecond, which was pretty good at that time. So we could do like reaction times or times for, an event to occur. Anyway, these computers were, let's just say, beyond tiny. The one I was working on initially had 256 words. It had a quarter of a K of memory. I mean, you probably can't even think of anything that small now, right? A quarter of a K of memory. That was it. That's all that it had for its internal program. So I had to be incredibly efficient. That didn't give very much room for data storage, right? So initially, the very first data storage I had was a teletype. You even know what that is? Okay, look it up. The teletype read and stored information on paper tape. It really was. It was a roll of paper it was actually impregnated with oil because it needed to not bind to itself. And there was a hole puncher, ASCII characters, eight holes. And you recorded data by telling the teletype one ASCII character at a time. Okay. And that was it, to punch a set of holes in the tape. And once that was done, it would edge forward just a little bit and it would punch the next one. And most of the data was numeric, so it wasn't too bad. But you could do alphanumeric as well. But yeah, and then you could then use the teletype to read the tape. So you could prepare a data set by typing on the teletype, and that would punch holes in this paper tape. And then you could read it and into the computer. But you had to be very careful about that because there was only 256 words of memory. So what we ended up doing was you would read in just enough data to perform a function, and then erase the buffer, so to speak, erase the data, and go on to the next one. So at any given time, the only live data was enough to perform one operation pretty much at a time. So we use these computers to control equipment, because they were set up so that they could send electrical pulses out and in through cables. So if you wanted to, like, one of the things I did was used it to control a shutter. So we could control how long, if we wanted a flash of 50 milliseconds, it would send out a pulse to the shutter to open it, count down 50 milliseconds, and then send out another pulse to close the shutter. So we had pretty fine control over the shutter. And that's how you got information out. You could determine, depending on the response that came back from whatever, you could then also control the next thing. So these were, experimental control and data collection things. And then the response would come back. Something would come back through one of the, what was it called, a bus? I can't recall exactly anything. So a signal would come back in, the computer would read it, send the result over to the teletype, which would then record it on the paper tape. And then the data that came out from an experiment was this long roll of oily yellow paper tape that was covered with little holes, ASCII character holes. Then things got really sophisticated, and we figured out how to use a cassette tape recorder, to use the tape to record data, and then also learned how to use the tape. You had to be careful about this, because it was, tapes were sequential, not random access memory. They were just sequential. You could send program instructions to overwrite parts of the program in that kind of sequential way. And so that expanded what the computer could do, because you could change the program during the course of an experiment by using the information that was on the magnetic tape. Anyway, I actually got pretty good at this in terms of programming it in a really efficient way, and using the tape to manipulate the program during the course of an experiment. And the other thing I did, I was really proud of this, it was a really cool thing, is that because there was so little memory storage, I wrote a subroutine that could it could encode and then decode. It was a tiny little subroutine. I think it was like 12 instructions long, which was, used up 12 out of 256 words of memory to store this thing. But this subroutine could pack. It only worked for the numerics, okay? Because then there were some redundant bits in the ASCII character with numerics. But I could pack 3 ASCII characters into 1 word of memory, effectively tripling the data storage capacity of this little computer using that one little subroutine. If I were to duplicate that now, I would have no idea where to even start. But back in the day, I was able to do that, and that was a kind of a big breakthrough in terms of the ability to use this computer to control experiments. And then, and eventually, although they were really useful for experimental control and data collection, there wasn't enough there to really do anything with it. So the department eventually got PDPs, PDP 8, I think, and then got really sophisticated and got PDP 11s and 10s. And these were gigantic machines that had like kilobytes of stuff. And we programmed those instead of machine language, which is what I was using on these little computers. It had its own language. They were proprietary. It had its own language that we programmed in. It had like 20 different instructions that could be used. The PDPs had assembly language, and that was really sophisticated. And you could hit like floating memory, where you could, instead of specifying exactly these little computers, if you were to store something, you had to tell it exactly where to go. But the PDPs did these amazing things, like you would just give it a name and it would put it somewhere and it would find it again. And you didn't have to say, address 115 and then go back and find whatever was in address 115. So that became kind of fun to work with. And I really like that kind of stuff, the the level of control one had over the machine. Sounds kind of funny now, doesn't it? But, to be able to just control every little thing, including the location of bits. That we had with machine language and assembly language programming. So when Windows came out, it was like, this is not even computer stuff anymore. And then I stopped caring or playing with it anymore because it wasn't really doing computer stuff. Anyway, yeah, ground floor kind of things, rambling about old computer history. But where I was going with the story, and this is a true story, is that this was before Pong. Okay, before Pong, I had these little computers that we used to control experiments. And what do? You sit around and you're playing with the computer and you're making it do interesting things, and you're storing 3 ASCII characters in 1 word of memory and doing fun stuff like that. I taught the computer how to play Hangman. The computer didn't guess. Okay, the people guessed, and we played on the teletype. That's how we communicated with the computer via the teletype. So the computer, this was the end result. The computer would print out on the teletype. It used underlining to indicate how many letters are in the word. So the words were stored on magnetic tape because there wasn't enough room in the computer memory to store more than, like 6 words or something. So the words were on magnetic tape. So I taught the computer, I programmed the computer to read a word from the tape, count how many letters there were in it, and print out on the teletype dashes for how many letters. So like there are 5 letters or whatever. And then, somebody would guess and they type in a letter on the teletype, and the computer would it would print out the same number of dashes, but if that letter was correct, it would print that out. So like if the word was stop, right, which is not a good hangman word, not like links or something. So stop. So somebody would guess S. And it would go S blank, blank, blank. And then they'd guess W, and it would go S blank, blank, blank. And it would count how many failed guesses you had. So it wasn't sophisticated enough to draw a hangman. I probably could have done that, but I didn't get that far into it. No, it was bad. Okay, I just dropped the chair. I need to find this. Doing pretty well, not losing things. So I just dropped one of these there. Okay, so I'm going to stop my story. I'm going to take my break now, and I'm going to use the break to find the chair, hopefully, and also disassemble. Well, I'll do that a little later. I'm going to start my break and find the chair. See you in about half an hour. Huh. Well, I'm back from break, and I managed to find a little chair that I dropped on the floor. Yay, that was good. Kind of a shock that I was able to do that, but it did. So, yeah. So I cleaned up the 3 bigger ones and 4 little ones in the sink. I've got 2 more little chairs and a weird stool thing that the periscope operator uses. Yeah, it was kind of a long break. But there were things that needed to be done. There always are. They kind of add up, and then break time comes, and then it takes a while. And there's some other things that needed to be done that haven't been done yet that I'll be doing after the stream. Anyway, I've got 2 more of these little chairs to clean up, hopefully without losing any. While I was looking for the chair, I found half a missile launching tube that when I was rummaging through boxes to find these parts, apparently I popped it out and dropped it on the floor. But I'm not sure. I'm trying to match colors. I think it's actually from the original kit that I've been working from. This will be important in the next section because that's the missile launching area. That won't be an issue for quite a while yet because this is going to take a good deal of time to finish. I was hoping to have finished all of these chairs, prep and everything before the break, but that didn't happen. So I'm going to finish them now. And then I will be disassembling the temporary assembly of the submarine. So you'll get to see that before I take it apart. That'll be slightly interesting because it looks pretty cool. But it needs to come apart because there's still work that has to be done before that's finished, including painting the hull. But I probably won't paint the hull until this deck is done. Then I can just match everything up. To go. So what I'll be doing after I finish these chairs, there's 2 more little bits to go, is bringing over the submarine hull so you can see how it all fits together. and then disassembling it, filling in some holes and some circles, putting this back in the box. And then test fitting these pieces into the deck, the control room deck. Again, probably need to manipulate them again before final assembly, because things change, especially after painting. Is this one of those little chairs? Yeah, this might be one that I need to replace. They're on little pedestals, and sometimes the little prong that goes below the pedestal isn't long enough. I've had to do that with like 3 or 4 of these chairs before. We'll see. When it comes time for test assembly. It's not too bad. And then there's this. This is a weird thing. There's like this chair up on the top of this pedestal, and that's for the periscope operator. Apparently the periscope can't be set up so that you're actually sitting like on a chair on the floor. You have to be on this high chair kind of thing. It's just odd. Yeah, it's very, very, this is one of those really badly molded things. Don't line up. The two sides are not lined up with each other. Yes. And yeah, so I'll be pulling out the submarine hull and showing you how the parts fit together eventually once I get the control deck done. And I'll be noting what needs to be done on the hull in terms of painting and things. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the white plastic putty on the places where it needs to go. And then depending on the time, I could either work on the inside of the hull, painting that, or I could paint this bulkhead. I could start painting that. It'd be kind of nice to get that done. That was one of the very first pieces to be worked on the submarine, and it's going to end up being one of the last that's beginning to look like. It's the forward bulkhead of the torpedo room. And it needs some extremely fine, detailed background painting of the base bulkhead color, green bulkhead color, around all of the detail that I have painted so far. So we'll see. We'll see if I'm up to tiny little bitty brush painting with my head magnifiers or not. So I can't tell if that bit there is supposed to be part of the support for the chair or whether it's just some additional plastic that's sitting there because that's where it was attached to the tree. I'm going to kind of call it a support structure. Oh, doesn't look right. There are some really tiny parts. I think I've lost this one twice. I've dropped this one at least twice so far. Been able to find it, which is, finding things on the floor is, it's good to find them. That's symmetric enough that it looks like it could be the way the chair is molded rather than just excess plastic. So what I was rambling on about before break was that I taught this little computer, which by this point in time had been upgraded to have 516 words of memory. Half a K. I had half a K of memory to work with. And I taught it how to play hangman using a teletype. And the thing is, these computers were like home built in a sense. An engineer hired by the department actually constructed these things because they were designed for controlling experiments. Okay. And the whole language, the machine language, was designed to receive signals, record them, send out signals in response, record time, like a big stopwatch kind of thing, either for timing outgoing or measuring reaction time kinds of things. So they were being built from scratch right there in the department. So what, to move this story along, I have to move it along slowly because I got all this time to fill here while I'm filing away at this chair. So the point of this was that I taught it how to play hangman, and it would be possible to record the words on magnetic tape. And we were sitting around playing at one time in the evening, like four of us. And someone said, I bet you could put this in a bar and people would pay quarters to play. Okay, that you'd sit down like at this little screen. Maybe you could do it on a screen or even just even text. You could just have text show up on a CRT screen. You wouldn't even have to have, but we probably would have built a little hangman figure to go on it because you could just, it was just at a time when you could start producing really primitive little graphics on CRT tubes, the kind that were green and black with green numbers and letters. So yeah, I've got this. Just put it on the floor. Why not? Eventually, that'll get vacuumed. Yeah, so we're sitting around playing this and saying, "Oh, I bet people would pay quarters at a bar for this." And we thought, since these computers were being built, one could be built specifically to play this game, right? And you wouldn't have to buy like a PDP-8 or something hugely powerful, which would make it way too expensive and unrealistic to be able to pull it off. And we said, yeah, that'd be a cool idea. I bet people would do that. Should we do that? We all looked at each other and said, no, let's do science instead. So, yeah, everybody has their chance, right? Everybody's got their chance, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And in that particular case, it just didn't. It was, you look back at that and say, I don't know, it might have been fun for a while. Okay, I've got those all sorts of little divots and things that need to be filled in. And there was a ramble. I got a ramble in. Haven't done one of those in a little while. And now, get my face out from behind the camera thing here. Hydrate. Is I'm going to bring over the submarine hull. I'll be right back and be able to see how this works. I showed this at the very beginning of the stream, but I'll show it now before I take it apart. This is a temporary installation. Okay, I mean it's just here so I could see if I could get this in, because this particular bulkhead would not fit before. So I did a whole lot of filing yesterday. Okay, so I'm looking at this, and there's a problem. If you can see the these are like the periscope things, right? These are supposed to fit into tubes, and those tubes go in where these holes are. So basically, these should be lined up with these holes, and they're not. They're off by 1/8 of an inch. Why would that be the case? I have no idea. It's like, is this whole thing up here misaligned? But it works. So it's supposed to happen, and I'll show you one. What's supposed to happen is that this goes up in this tube. Yeah, this is another reason to try this, right? These parts fit and they don't fit all at the same time. This tube is supposed to fit on here and between there and the deck, right? And you can see right off, and just look at it, that it's too long. It's not going to fit there. So even though this deck is more or less where it should be, and this is going to be an issue, is this tube is at least 1/8 of an inch too long. It's just not going to fit. It's not going to fit into that space. Nope. No way. So this is supposed to go in here like this, kind of inset into that little recess. Okay. These pull up, especially this one, because this is the one I'm dealing with here. After you squeeze all of these things back in here, this tube goes on here, like that. And it's all come apart now. But yeah, I was afraid of that. I was kind of figuring that would be the case, that that when it came time to put these things together, that these periscope tubes, they were just going to be an issue. Because as it is, these things are just, the clearances, there's just not much clearance. They kind of just barely fit where they're supposed to go, even when you rotate them a little bit. And there's no way that's going to fit. Nope. So I'm going to have to manipulate the height of these tubes at some point before this is fully assembled. be rotated some. Yeah, this things just don't fit very well. I'll just put it that way, right? Even if this is pushed down as far as it goes, it it doesn't fit. And I'm thinking that when it comes time to do this, that one choice would be to like try to shorten everything down below. Leave a gap there, or things are not going to line up. This is just not going to fit. It's just terrible. I might have to see if I can find another piece, but these tubes are way too long. Okay, you can see that. I wish the tweezers would actually hold them. The tubes, no, they're not going to. The tubes are way too long to fit in there. Okay, I mean, way too long. And that deck is not lined up. In order to line it up, I'd have to move it there. Leaving, excuse me, a pretty significant gap here on the front. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. That wasn't all that not necessarily all that comfortable. So I'm going to try to put these pieces back together again, just to see how bad the fit is and why. But yeah, that all has to go forward in order for this to fit in. There we go. Get that in the slot there. Get it more or less lined up. If this goes in like this, I mean, the whole thing looks like it lines up pretty well with these floors and everything else. But these tubes, once I figure out how to hold them, even if I put it way down on the floor, when you can see how much it doesn't fit, which makes me worry about some other things. This. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm beginning to have a problem with fit and finish. I needed that to replace one of the others that didn't fit, but were warped. It was really badly warped, and that one's flat. I want to look at the third model and see if I can't get that to work. Yeah, fit and finish is, especially the fitting part, is really the problem with this thing. So this bulkhead goes here, and then when this slides into the submarine, it's supposed to fit in here. But if this is too tall, like those tubes are, it's going to be a challenge. And as you can see, the slots, these tabs were too big for the slots. Part of this might be that this was molded for a different submarine, a different model. And as I look at this, all right, this isn't what I expected. I expected this to have gone together a little better because this actually fits, sort of. I actually got this to fit into pretty much where it belongs. That itself was a challenge. I expected there to be a problem with the tubes that held the periscopes and snorkels and radio antenna, but I didn't expect it to be quite so bad. I had a problem with the top of this. These tubes were too long, too. Wow, these tabs. Okay, what I'm going to try to do, I'm not sure. I didn't intend to take time to do this today, but I need to in order to get anywhere. Is I need to open up another box. I need to open up one of the other boxes and see if I can find this part and see if it's warped or not. Because this one just isn't fitting very well. Okay. This is the same part from a different submarine. And I don't know, it looks the same. So I'm not sure I've got much of an improvement here. Let's see if this fits any better. I would say, if anything, it's worse. But let me see if it lines up any better. Yeah, the same issue. If you look at it, these periscopes don't come anywhere close to where they need to be. each each one is progressively awful, and yeah, this is going to take like forever to get this to fit because it needs to be fit before assembly. But look at that. When we're looking at a huge, there's no, this is sitting exactly where it needs to be, and that doesn't come anywhere close to fitting there. Even though it fits in the submarine, Mutter, 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 curse, curse, curse. Yeah, so this is all fitting in where it needs to be, but it doesn't line up with what's in there before, and the size is wrong. Yeah, this is just a real challenge. But since this doesn't work any better than the other one, I'm going to keep worrying about what I'm getting into here. And I'm getting to be very concerned about how this is going to go. And these tabs, when I start fitting pieces together, these tabs don't come. They just don't come close to where they the right size at all. But what I'm concerned about here is that not only are those tubes, which, I can make those shorter. I did with the other ones before, the ones up here, those were like a 1/16 of an inch too long. And I was able to file those down so that they fit. The one good thing about a model like this is that, you can manipulate the pieces so that you can get them to fit. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about the alignment of the periscopes. I'll be able to stuff them into the tubes. They probably won't operate. They won't slide up and down. And if worse comes to worse, and I can't get them at all, I'll just shove them into the tops. I can just cut them right off, right there, and cement them in place in a way. And they just won't go up and down. You'll never know the difference because the model, okay. But this is not the first time that the tabs didn't work. And I think what's happened, and this is a weird thing, it happened with this bulkhead down here, this one that didn't fit, is that the parts are actually molded a little too thick. They are just a little bit thicker than they should be. And so the tabs don't go into the slots. And in this case, the whole bulkhead wouldn't fit into the slots either. So then you just end up with a whole lot of no, we can't allow problems. You just end up with a whole lot of like this kind of manipulation of the plastic parts just to get things to fit not properly. I won't say they're fitting properly, because if they did, they would just snap together, but at all. Okay, so I made those a little bit narrower. And what I want to see is whether or not what I am seeing is that everything's falling apart. I'm going to take the bunks out because that doesn't really help at this point. What you're seeing is demolition. You're seeing demolition going on instead of deconstruction. Something that did fit together is now coming apart in a major way. And what I'm doing is I'm anticipating a problem that I will need to deal with in a not too distant future, which is, will this bulkhead, I know the tubes don't fit, but will this bulkhead fit? And it does. Okay. I mean, that's actually a shocking, I mean, it's a little crooked. I need to manipulate that a little bit. I'm not even going to cement that in at some point. But that, okay, that's kind of a shocking surprise. Okay, so what I know is that this bulkhead will be set into the floor, but I'm not going to cement it because it needs to go in like that. Yeah, of course, I'm using the wrong one. I said I was going to use this one. Let's see how this one works. Should be identical, right? I mean, it should be. When I put that together in final form, it'll sit on there like that. And it just basically locks this whole thing into place. But it does fit, which means it will go, it'll, and that doesn't fit right. But when that fits, this doesn't fit where it fit before. So I probably need to make that just a little bit smaller. So that it's not, what it's doing is it's pushing down in the center here. And it's bowing this floor. So, I'll just make this a little bit smaller here. Just dial it down a little bit before assembly. But yeah, I'm just detecting a whole lot of assembly challenges. Let's put it that way. Okay, this guy comes apart. All of these pieces come apart here. So this now is back to where it was some time ago. That way I'm going to look at these two in terms of straightness. Let's see which one is more warped than the other. Actually, I'm going to stick with this one. This Thomas Jefferson one will go back. Sorting those parts out later. And this submarine here. All right. So what I've learned is that almost nothing fits, which is not a surprise. That's just really typical. These tubes are way too long. That's going to require a lot of manipulation in order to get it to work. This is not too terribly warped. This part will fit. So before I start trying to fit parts together, this one doesn't come till later. Both of these pieces are later parts. Before I do more in terms of fitting parts like this one, okay, so this one is supposed to go here, and it almost does, but not quite. This is all you get. That's it for the for the head or the rest of the bathroom. Before I start fitting all those parts, no. What am I saying? How much time do I have left? Like 45 minutes. Okay. What I need to do yet, and I'm muttering now, is I need to, all these things underneath here that I thought I had filled in that I failed to fill in need to be filled in with plastic putty. Okay. These little holes need the same treatment. But just like with this part, you know, how this part didn't fit. Okay. And now it does. I'm going to do the same thing with a lot of these other parts to see if I can't get them to fit better. And I'm going to do this for like 15 minutes, however much I can get done in that amount of time. And after that amount of time has expired, I am going to do the plastic putty part. Because the plastic putty part is something that needs to be done now so that it can dry and be sanded. Okay. And I will just say this whole thing would be a whole lot easier if, in fact, the parts fit. Because after they're painted, I mean, I want them to all fit. So I'll be testing them over and over again before I start painting. And I know this is relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons, but if you're not seeing any painting, then it becomes misleading. So I hope this isn't too terribly annoying. I mean, to be watching Submarine Wednesday and be spending almost the entire time just watching pieces not fit. And as I said, where this fits into the hull, it's going to have to be made a little smaller, especially up at the top, because it is bowing. It pushes down on it and it bows the deck below it. And that's not a helpful thing. So I'll do a little bit of that now. Sure, if that's going to need the same sort of treatment. But this is going to be test fitted several times before I really start getting into painting. Some of these things I can paint right away, like the bunks and the bookshelves and control panels and things, and the chairs. I can paint those and maybe even install them because they're not critical to the fit. They just sort of sit there on the surface of the floor. But something like this, yeah, if this doesn't fit and it bends out of shape, the floor below it, the whole thing looks really crappy. Anyway, there's that. And then the bunks go in here. They sort of fit. Okay. What we've got here is, yeah, if they tilt forward, they fit okay. This thing goes, this then fits here. There's not much clearance. Okay. This goes here. It goes right up against the wall of the other room. And as you can see, it was well designed. The locker blocks the other locker. of course. That's really helpful, isn't it? Goes here. Neither of those come close to fitting. So I've got a few minutes left in my manipulation of tabs and slots time. So let's see if we can't get that done. And then a chair goes there. It's like there's 3 chairs and I've got 4. So that one, that looks like it's flawed because it is. Probably I don't need to use it. And that's good. Not having to use one that isn't good is good. It's better than having to use one that isn't good, because that wouldn't be good. So there. So if I can keep the disaster of part fitting down to just those tubes, and even if it means that I lose the ability to have those periscopes work, I can always, like I said, cement them in place and just in a way that looks for display decent. It's not that big a deal. Because they don't line up. They just don't. And the tubes are wrong. So I'm guessing that whole periscope kind of thing is going to have to be manipulated in kind of a shoddy way. Okay. That goes with the bunks here. You put these bookcases and shelves and stuff in, and it's a great convenience for the people sleeping in the bunks, except for the fact that it keeps them from getting in and out of the bunks. Yeah, so why should that be an issue, right? I think when I did this when I was in grade school, and I was sort of on camera, kind of. I think when I did this in grade school, I didn't paint a lot of this. I'm pretty sure that most of this just stayed gray. No, the groceries must have arrived. Dogs are in frantic mode. No, we got a problem. Sorry. We had a puppy breakout. It was almost a disaster, but not quite. The groceries came and they were not restrained well enough because somebody wasn't there. So this whole modeling thing, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, 50% of this thing is finding, filing, and sanding parts so that they actually fit. And only 50%, maybe not even that, is painting and assembly. It's pretty, so that's how this model is. So these things will have to be cemented into place so that they work. The critical parts of these two bulkheads, and those two bulkheads need to fit into the submarine hull. Looks like this, in order to get this to work at all, I'm not sure why that's so twisted over. There really shouldn't be anything in the way there, but it's going to have to be cemented at the top because it's. If I take this out, let me take these parts apart. No, it's got to be the bunk that's pushing it. Yeah, you see how it kind of pushes away there? Anyway, they need to go together like that. And I think I need to look at the back of this to see what the problem is as I continue to work on the issue of assembly and whether things fit or not, which they don't. So I'm wondering why. I think it's because this bunk is not fitting properly. And it protrudes on the bottom. So I'm going to take the last 5 minutes of prep work here before I move on. And it's a prep work to get this bunk to fit in so that the bulkhead fits next to it. So yeah, I mean, you can just see that just the amount of time it takes to manipulate these parts to fit. And then even after you do that, they don't, is truly impressive given what probably was the original price of this model. I'm sure that when I did this when I was a kid, I just sort of, the cement dissolved the plastic, that I trim them down a little bit and just slam cement on it. And that would solve the issue. It would just dissolve the plastic and things would slide into each other because it was molten. And what's happening here is that the bottom, and actually it's enough that you can actually see it, that the bottom of this protrudes way out. And that's keeping the bulkhead from settling next to it. And that's really weird how that is. Because I was wondering, the bulkhead, when I set it in there, fit pretty nicely. But then I set it next to the bunk, and the bottom of it was pushed away. I have a fair amount of tolerance here because this isn't going to show. Put this in, and when I put this in, it should be, yeah. Remember how it was pushed away before? Now it isn't, because apparently I have succeeded in getting rid of that problem. I still don't know if this will fit into the submarine. I know those don't. The tubes don't fit, and they don't line up. So that's going to be an issue. This goes here. That's a part that actually fits. Let's go here. That's a part that actually fits. This goes here. It's a part that doesn't. Oh, that's so frustrating. It's the last one, other than the tiny chairs and junk. Okay, so I'm going to lie, and I'll go a little bit long while I manipulate these pieces. Because if I can get this one to fit, then I can set them all in there, and you can see what it looks like, except for the periscope and radio antenna tubes, which are awful in terms of their fit and finish. Yeah. At least as I get near the end of the stream, I tend to, it's just harder to get things done because I have like low blood sugar or start getting tired or something. So I want to just do the application of the white plastic putty. That is the last thing, because if that messes up, then it gets all fixed in the sanding down, which then turns out to be a lot of work. Essential. So this need to be more or less flat as well. You end up with gaps on the bottom. Yep. As I promised, I delivered. This is all sanding and filing today. That'll fit. That fits, that fits. And I just got these little bits here that I'm going to put in the slots so you can see this is supposed to come together, other than the chairs and the receptacle tubes for the periscopes and radio antenna. Cramps in my hands. Yeah, you know that's getting to be time to quit. So yeah, if I were to just say, we're not going to paint any of this, if I were to just say that, which would be a nice, interesting thing to say, this is pretty much how the control room and this area here, the bunk room, and the head or the bathroom looks. The stuff behind it, this is really silly. Okay, see these fire extinguishers all over the place? The painting instructions go out of their way to say, paint them red. And this fits tight against the hull here and here. And why would I do that? Why would I paint them at all? You can't see them. The only way you could possibly see them would be if you took this apart, dropped it on the floor or something. But these parts, at least pre-painting, fit together pretty well. I need to fit the chairs, get the chairs to fit. And then these tubes, the way these are supposed to go is they go in like this. This is lovely. I mean, if you look at them, they're not even the same size. These two are way longer than the periscope one, and the periscope one was too long. I wonder if they intentionally did that. I wonder if they intentionally made the kit so that you never were quite exactly sure, how these would fit together. So they made the tubes different sizes. Yeah, and they're all different sizes. Look at that. If you look at the sail, the floor is this, I have no clue what they're thinking. Maybe they made them intentionally too long so that, they would fill the gap. And you would cut them down to size. And you have to cut them down to size because even the shortest of the three is too long. So that, yeah. That is certainly a mystery of the kit, that these three tubes are such hugely different lengths. Yeah. Anyway, that's how this is going to end up looking, and you can imagine this being nicely painted. The bunks being brown and white, and the lockers being locker color, and the fire extinguishers being red, and all of these little dials and things being painted. You can almost begin to imagine that. And I'll invite you to imagine that as I take this all apart. These parts need to be primed. This part doesn't fit. I'm going to manipulate that a little bit. Let's see, I need to find the ones that have things that need to be filled in. I think this is one of them. Going 10 minutes over here on the fitting of parts, but yeah, parts need to fit. So let's see what I can do to get them to do that. This is the side that needs to be filed down. The other side, I could mess up the detail on the locker. Professional model maker, somebody who really knew what they were doing, they'd be spending a lot more time on it than I am getting these parts to fit. Maybe even like remolding some of them themselves just to work, get them to work. This one. When these get cemented in, there's going to be a fair amount of holding in place. Okay. Holding in place to keep them straight. It's like vertical, right? Okay. There's that. This one has a hole in it. This one has little things. I'm going to set this aside. This needs to be cleaned up here too. There, but that's another issue. I'll do that some other time. I want to get the plastic putty stuff on these pieces. So all of these indentations down here need to be filled in, especially the ones near the front, because they didn't get filled last time. So I'm going to put an excess. I'm going to squeeze it into the hole. And instead of trying to level it, this will work. Squeezing out. So instead of trying to level it out, I'm going to squeeze it into the opening and let it build up in excess, because then I can sand down to it. Seriously, I'm getting a hand cramp. Whoa, okay. Not getting any out. I'm getting too much out. I'm just going to make a mess of it, kind of, so that I can sand it flat later. I should have done that the first time. I tried to be careful so I didn't have too much sanding, and then it turned out badly. And I just ended up with indentations. This way I can use like a sanding block, I guess, and just even it out. sanding block. And it's okay if I sand the paint down because I have to repaint it anyway, right? But I don't want dimples. So now I'm just making little peaks. See how many there are. Each one of those is where something is glued in from the surface. And then I'm going to let this sit upside down so that if gravity decides to do anything valuable at all, it will pull the putty down into it. See, on this, where these bunks went in, I somehow was able to get enough of it in there so that it doesn't show very much. Okay, now with these, this one's pretty easy because I can sand this down without a problem. The other ones are going to require a good deal more care. This, I'm just trying to fill in these little holes. And it's a flat surface, so I can build up on it. And then when it dries, I can sand it down quite easily. Okay. And this one, kind of straightforward in that there is a hole. Play around with this a little bit because you want to fill the hole in, but then there's detail above and below it. And what I wanted was a toothpick. Handily stored on the floor. To pull it away from be able to sand that. I may end up using like a little bit of an X-Acto knife or something to pull it away from those little raised edges. Make sure that there's enough in there so that when it dries, it still fills the hole. So on this one, there's a circle down in the bottom there, but that's going to be very hard to see. That's right at the top. Okay. This one is this little indentation right in the center of that locker. Build it up. And then this has the same issue of these detailed lines on either side of it. This one's important to make sure that that indentation is filled in, because when you look at it from the front, you're looking right at that. And I want that to not be a little round circle. This one, you're looking at it from the side, so it's not quite the same problem, but again, it's just, you don't need these little circular holes in the middle of your locker. Here. So this will be, be a little bit of a challenge to get those filed or sanded down. I think I can pull it off, hopefully, without ruining too much detail in the process. The bed will be easy. And then here, like I said, I didn't fill in the holes well enough. I was trying to do a shortcut, basically. So now I've just put the plastic putty above the surface. And there's just a whole lot of sanding that will need to be done to flatten it out. And then I need to repaint the surfaces, but that's easy. That's just, just brushing paint across. That's not too hard at all. These guys need to dry off and then be sanded down. The parts fit so far, the ones that I've tested. I haven't tested the chairs yet. The tubes that hold the radio antenna and the periscopes, those are just going to be a huge challenge. It's so bizarre how long they are. And they almost but not quite fit. So when it comes down to it, I'm not sure how I'm going to do these. I'd like them to go in and just hold. I think one of them did. This one's almost too big for the hole, so you can put it in and it'll hold. This one's a little small. The diameters aren't even the same on each of them, much like the length. Now this one, the other one just barely squeezed in. This one, to say, this is going to be and this thing needs to just sort of slide in. So I'm going to have to manipulate those things over and over and over again to get them to the right length so that they'll actually fit. This part doesn't come till later, so I can just set that aside. These guys, they're getting ready to prime. After I sand those down, and I'll probably do that off stream, I'm going to prime this stuff, including these tubes, knowing that the tubes are going to take just a lot of work. Okay. So in the last couple of minutes, since I've got a couple of minutes left, and I've got this piece that just needs to be filed down a little bit, I'm going to talk about Dice and Dungeons real quickly. Dice and Dungeons is a group of family friends, and we, over a year ago, started a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which continues to this day, and it's streamed with a live chat on Sundays, 3 Sundays a month. Check social media for the schedule. 3 Sundays a month, starting at 2:00 Eastern Standard Time. And it's an amazing campaign in a world created by our dungeon mistress, Alexis. We're having a lot of fun in it. We've only almost died 3 times in the campaign so far, most fairly recently, and once before because our druid couldn't tell the difference between feet and yards and almost drowned themselves and one of the others, Zoria Ansul. Seriously, almost drowned them by teleporting into the water instead of onto a boat. That was it was like terrible. And the DM said, okay, do a strength check or whatever it was to see if you could stay above water, and everybody kept failing. My character was trying to swim to them with a swim speed of like 0 practically, so I couldn't get there in time to help. I think after almost killing 2 of the characters, and it wasn't even combat, it was just being silly and just not being able to tell numbers. He finally sent someone in a boat. Okay, it was like, you really, seriously, you are going to die here. And this is really early in the campaign, and I don't want to have to start over. So, yeah, she took mercy and saved us, but we almost got killed a couple of other times by actually getting almost killed. Usually by rolling a lot of 2s and 3s, and sometimes 1s. Our combat rolls tend to be amusingly for the audience and not very amusingly for us, terrible. Anyway, yes, join us on Sundays, 3 Sundays a month at 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time while we do a D&D campaign. And this relaxing painting thing started because we started printing dungeon tiles. And in the last 5 minutes, I'll even demonstrate them because I have a space here now about how our dungeon tiles work. And they became more and more and more sophisticated. And we started painting them. And Alexis said, well, if you're going to be painting, why don't you stream the painting? And it's like, well, we're going to be doing it anyway. And we're not investing in a studio. We're investing in a camera, a Ring camera, which wasn't very expensive, and a microphone, which was surplus. Yeah, so there it is. And that's why we have relaxing painting with Dice and Dungeons, because almost all of it is doing minifigs and dungeon tiles for our D&D campaign. And on Mondays and Fridays, that's what we do. Been doing minifigs lately. And on Wednesdays, I've been doing Submarine Wednesdays, at least for now. So let me just cover these things up so that they don't get, and put the cover on this so that they don't spill all over the place and I lose them. Okay, so these now are nicely covered with paper towels so that they don't get all covered with dust or whatever. Put the instruction sheet back on, put the files away, put this out of the way, move this up out of the way a little bit, and I'm going to demonstrate our wonderful dungeon tiles because I haven't done that in a couple of streams now. These are just some small samples. What's really cool about these are painted but not washed, so they're pretty flat looking, but they have magnets in the base, and not a magnet that you stick onto a metal plate or something like that. These are magnets that stick to each other. So watch, you can do that. Do that, and it holds. And if you don't like that configuration, just pull them apart and ta-da, like that. Or if you want to do this, you can do that. Or if you want to do that, you can do that. And it's just so easy to manipulate these things. And that's what we do with our dungeons now, so that we can put together with a set of dungeon tiles massive numbers of configurations. This is rough stone. We have cut stone and we have wood. The wood with stucco walls are very pretty. But that's a great feature of these. And these are all printed as one solid piece. Okay, so you don't have to worry about the walls breaking off. okay, or the floor is coming off of the base. The only thing that's separate is this very tiny little bit on the bottom that snaps or cements on after putting the magnets, the ball magnets, into their little holes. So, yeah, relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons. This is the dungeon part after having been painted. Well, anyway, thank you for watching another episode of Submarine Wednesday. I did get parts all prepped. Once that plastic putty dries, I'll be able to sand it down, and I might, if I get around to it, I like to do that kind of off stream because it's even less interesting than watching me try to get pieces to fit. I'll try to sand that down and get them primed so that I can start to paint them. Okay. And most of it will be a lot of detail. I will find it very frustrating detail painting, and you will hear me be frustrated by it because of all the little dials and knobs and buttons and everything else that are on the control panels. But at least you'll start seeing some progress, and that'll be different. Excuse me. And yeah, eventually this deck will be done. And if I can get the tubes that hold the periscopes in, if it's possible even to do that, I will have the first third of the submarine done. And then I can start working back, excuse me, to the missile launching areas. Anyway, another exciting episode of sanding and filing and part fitting. And oh my God, this isn't going to work. How am I ever going to get this fit together? Submarine building. Join us Friday from more or less 10 until more or less 2 as I return to painting dragonkin, like this one that I had done on Monday. I'm working on blue, and then we'll move on from blue to either red or black dragonkin. We'll see how that goes. See you then. Have a good day. Have a good tomorrow. Well, yeah, it was sort of productive. Not really. Well, it's one of those things where if you just keep moving along, eventually something does get done, as we have very slowly seen here. Yeah. See you Friday, more or less 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Thank you. See you then.